This afternoon in the workshop we're going to be looking at the Rode lavalier microphone. This is not the one that they sell on its own in a nice plastic case. This is the one that comes with the Rodelink filmmaker kit, which is a belt pack transmitter and receiver, so you have a wireless link from wherever you are to wherever you're recording. In our case, a field recorder on the other side of the room. It's actually just in shot behind me. I'm trying to if I can figure out about there. That's the field recorder. I didn't read the description properly. It was fairly cheap, so I really wanted to get paid for quickly before somebody else snapped it up. And when I went back and had a look again after I'd paid for it, the seller had listed or described the microphone as crackling, and I figured, well, it was cheap enough, that doesn't really matter all that much. It's probably just a break in the cable. So we're going to take this over to the bench, figure out what the problem is, and see what we can do to fix it. Before we can actually make a repair, we need to figure out where the problem is. And to do that, we're going to plug the microphone into the Pocket Track PR7, little Yamaha voice recorder I've got here. These two built-in mics are actually pretty good, but there's always something a little bit empty about the sound that you get out of the microphone input, so I don't use this anymore. And then I'm going to plug my headphones in. And so that we don't end up with a load of noise from knocking around the capsule of the microphone, I'm going to take that and just tape it down. Ordinarily I wouldn't bother doing this, but for your sake, so it doesn't all sound awful as we go along and try and figure out where our problem is. So if we shuffle that to one side, what we can do is go along the cable bit by bit, and we're fairly sure that I'm fairly sure it's either a break in the cable or a short. And we can just shuffle along little bit by little bit until something crackles, which is what we're really looking for. A pop or a crackle. So far, it's all been fairly quiet. And we'll just work our way along the cable. And I think the break is probably on the connector. Shuffle this over a little bit. And there we go. That's our fault, and you can see on the screen here, as soon as I do that, it's peaking. So I think our fault is pretty much right on the connector here, and to be honest, when you look at it, you can see that cable's been bent round. Hold that up a bit. You can see that cable's been bent round, and if we hold that end still and flex this bit, nothing but. Yeah, I'm fairly confident in saying that's where our fault is. Now, because it is in such an obvious place, there's not really any point in marking that, but we know we're going to cut the cable a bit further up. So I just want to be sure. Yeah, we'll probably end up cutting the cable about here. We'll unplug it before we do that. Put my headset and the recorder away. So yeah, I think we'll end up cutting about there. So we've got enough length on there that we can strip a bit off, figure out which wires connect to the terminals here, and that we're a good way above the fault. Let's give that a snip. That's, a reassuring clunk there. We'll shuffle this out of the way. We're going to strip that in a minute. I think these are going to be very, very thin cables, aren't they? So that was quite fiddly, as you can imagine. These are tiny cables. I actually snipped this back, got the proper wire strippers out, and the automatic ones. I'll show you. Here we go. Got a pair of these. If you don't have a pair of these, go and buy some. I think I mentioned these in the one of the VFD videos. They're only about 10 or 12 quid. Get on Amazon and go and get a set. They really do make life a lot easier once you get them dialed in. So if you're doing a batch of cables, just grab a bit of scrap and feed it in there and get your tension rate. Then it makes them really easy. You can just fly through it. But anyway, it even works on cables down to this size, and these are minuscule. I don't know what gauge these actually are, but they're absolutely tiny. Now I can get the camera to focus, which it very well might do. You'll be able to see just how small those cables are, and that's what we're going to have to deal with when we're soldering this. Or soldering the rest of the cable to its new connector. So yeah, they're minuscule. And what we need to do now, apart from focusing the camera, what we need to do now is test for continuity. We want to know which cables are going to which terminals. So bring the multimeter in. I've already got this on set to continuity mode, and hopefully the crocodile clip's going to grab onto the cable because they're very thin. But also want to be careful that we're not ending up touching both of them. So move that like that, and so this is the outer cable. Okay, so the outer goes to the sleeve, and the other one is it should go to well, the other two terminals. Which it does. So there we go. So that's what we're aiming for with our replacement plug. Let's shuffle that out of the way for a minute, and we can have a look at that. I'm going to bring the helping hands in because we're going to use those in a moment. I've got two different plugs here. This is the one that we're going to be using, and this has a slightly different method of the solder lugs are slightly different. So I pop this off, and again we'll have to fiddle about with the focus on the camera. Forgive me if the camera's shaking a little bit. There we go. You can see the fairly obvious, fairly sizable solder lugs on here, and these are really easy to solder onto. However, they're fairly bulky, so I pop the sleeve back on here. So these are fairly bulky. They've got a massive hole in there. Bear in mind it's a tiny cable that we're using, so this is about sort of 8 or 9 times the size that we need, 7 or 8 times the size we need. And it doesn't have the locking ring on there either. The original one does. If I grab that, it actually has a little, you see a little thread there, a little locking ring. And so what that does is, on the body of the transmitter pack, that you plug it in and you screw that down. That stops the two of them from coming apart. Not a huge concern for me, but you know, I like to keep things sort of as close to original as I can. But yeah, these ones are just they're also not very nice quality. They're sort of cheap and cheerful. So this is the one that we're going to be using. Again, it has that locking ring. So we're going to take that off because that's, in fact I'll tell you why in a minute. I'll show you the terminals on here. So again, if we can get this up here and get the camera focused up. There we go. It's all metal bodied, this, not plastic. The hole in the back is slightly smaller, but it doesn't have a big, what would be essentially a redundant strain relief sticking out the back. We are going to deal with that problem. I'll show you how when we've finished soldering. So if I take this off, you can see that under that cover there is a solder lug, and there are also these tiny little terminals, and they really are minuscule. They're only a couple of mil across, so they're a bit more of a challenge to solder up. And to do that, first off we probably ought to get our cable stripped down, so I'm not getting everything in place, and then we're still needing to do the cable. So I know roughly how much cable we're going to need. We'll cut a little bit extra. Here we go. Hopefully this won't embarrass me. It'll actually work. So you pop that in there, and see the teeth on this side will grip, and the blade on that side will pull the sheath off the cable. I'm not going to take all that much off of there. Sorry about that. There we go. The difficult bit now is actually teasing this apart from the fibre reinforcement. There we go. That's what I'm after. That's it. Right, so now we've got the two separated. So I really thought this was going to be like the I've done sort of headphone repairs in the past, and the cable's just kind of coated, but they're not really. But they're basically the strength of the cable is in the little wires that go through it. It's actually quite nicely built. Must say I've had fairly good service from Rode. I've got the I finally got the lavalier go back. I'm not using that right now, but once I got it back, they just sent me through a brand new one. I don't think they thought it was worth repairing. So hopefully now, when we use our strippers, because again, that's miniature, look at it. Look how small that is. Hopefully it's not going to pull the cable to pieces. I was a bit nervous. But again, this one has a fibre reinforcement. I don't know much about these tiny little cables, to be honest. All I know is that they're absolutely minuscule. So that has a fibre reinforcement. Again, this is actually thinner. It's a much thinner cable. And a real pain to get apart. There we go, all done. It's all separated. So I'm going to cut that off now. Carefully. I know it looks a bit scruffy on the bottom end there, but that is all going to be inside a connector, so I'm not overly worried about that. That's not pretty. Struggling to cut that last little bit off. There we go. So the next thing to do is to feed the cable through that cover. I've done that in the past. I've just forgotten, and it happens, you know, and it makes everything a lot more difficult. So I'm going to feed that through. You could do that before you strip the cable. It's, you know, personal preference, I guess. And now we actually need to figure out which terminals on here are which. I think that's going to be the ring, isn't it? This one, big one poking out. And then we want to solder that to both of these terminals. We can probably get away with only soldering one, I would have thought. But since it was hooked up to both of them on the original cable, we'll stick with that. So let's quickly figure out which ones are which. I'm fairly confident about this. I think that's going to be the sleeve. So a tip ring sleeve. Yep. So outer cable goes to that one, and the inner cable goes to the other two. So now we're going to solder this up. I've put a tiny little tip on the soldering iron there. Tiny. It's actually a brand new iron. The base unit's old, but the iron had failed, so it's been replaced. So it's got a bit of flux on it already, so hopefully that'll just tin up. There we go. I really want to be careful with this because those little plastic separators, I did watch a fella do a repair and he just used a massive tip on the soldering iron and melted the whole lot. I'd like to just be a bit more careful, so we're going to give that a second to cool down. Cut a bit more solder off. If you want to watch a really good soldering tutorial, if this isn't something you're used to doing, go and watch Big Clive. I wish he'd been I wish his videos had been around when I was starting out doing this sort of stuff. He's very, very, when it comes to electronics, he's very, very informative. And he needs to do like industrial lighting and things like that. So now we're going to tin the other two terminals. Ooh. Carefully. That's what I was saying about using a bigger tip on the soldering iron. That is a huge blob of solder. That's not what we want. It's very much not what I want. What we need is take a little bit of copper cable, a bit of flux on it, and just draw some of that off. Yeah, I think that'll be fine now. Really quite worried about melting the plastic on there. I think I might have done that already. It may well be too late. So, as long as it works. As long as it works, if it works. So again, just tin the cable. So put a bit of flux on there. Bear in mind, I'm going to have to trim these anyway, so I'm not too worried about being neat with them. I have a couple of frayed ends, it doesn't really matter so much, especially not for that outer one. This is going to be a horrible tip to tin the cable with, I'll tell you that. Yeah, not nice at all. Very unpleasant. It's about as much heat as I can get in there. That'll do. So now we figure out how much cable we actually need. I think for the outer we're probably right cutting it where that blob of solder is. It's probably about there. And hopefully that'll come together nicely. Okay, that's one. Let's put a touch of solder on here. I'm not enjoying using this tip. Now we want to just solder onto the other two terminals, and then we'll clip off whatever's left. There's one. There's two. So we've got a little bit of that wire overhanging. And we'll clip that off. Clip that off with a pair of clippers that are sharp. Maybe. There we go. Okay, and that is our not quite finished product. So the camera cut out just as I was about to do the continuity test on the plug. So if I hook the crocodile clip to the tip there, bring our multimeter in, get our probe and check for continuity on the ring, which we want, and continuity on the sleeve, which we don't want. Now you can see that lights up. There is continuity, it's going up the cable through the coil in the capsule here, back down to the ring and the tip. So what I'm saying is we don't want a short, we don't want direct continuity. We are going to test that again in a minute. All will become clear. But the thing to do now is actually check that this works. So I'm going to plug this back into the voice recorder along with my headphones, which this doesn't like because they're on a TRRS connection. So I have to be kind of careful about how I plug these in so I actually hear what's going on. Or I could just get an adapter. I do have one lying about somewhere. This is fiddly. This worked just fine a minute ago. So put that down and grab the mic. Okay, right, now I can hear the mic output through my headphones, and hit the record button, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it as well. So if I hold this up to my mouth, this is the Rode lavalier, the one that comes with the Rodelink kit, and that sounds pretty good. So if I run my hands down the cable, you can hear the rubbing on the cable, but there's no hissing, there's no crackling, there's no popping, which is, oh, there's a little bit there, but that's me knocking my headphones, and that's not not the microphone. Okay, that's cool. Be thinking the mic was going. No, the mic's good. I'm still being gentle with this because I don't want to knock the cables that are in here and have them pushed together. So now we can do a final continuity test, and then we're going to deal with the problem of strain relief. Obviously this connector doesn't come with any, so put that into the helping hands there, and get the again, get this hooked up to the tip. And yeah, that's exactly what we're expecting. So strain relief. Obviously the original plug has strain relief. It's moulded in. And the plug that I showed you earlier, this one, obviously it has this on here. If you've got a thick enough cable, that'll grip. But it also has, on this lug here, you fold that over to clamp the cable. And our one doesn't have that. I couldn't find anything commercially available either. So the solution that I've come up with, hopefully this will work, is essentially to pot it. So what we're going to do is mix up a bit of this resin. This is just the stuff from Poundland. Pick it up in a syringe and inject it into here. I bought these a whole lot of these a few years back, a job lot, because we had a printer and I had the refillable ink tanks, not cartridges, the whole tanks that just sat there, and they had hoses that went all the way through to the print head. And so yeah, I bought these for refilling them. They're just blunt. Yeah, you don't want a pointy syringe, you want blunt ones. You don't want to catch yourself by accident. But so yeah, you just pick the syringe up out of the bottle and squeeze it into the tank. These are great for anything that you don't want to get covered in. So the first thing we're going to do is break off the tips. They used to have a little, they would just snap off, but I don't quite know what's going on there. Maybe we snip them off, because that's the cap. They changed the design of these. Nice if things didn't change, wouldn't it? Do I cut them there? Just cut them there. No, cut them further down. Oh no, we can cut them there, but okay, one side's really soft and the other one isn't. Right, now we need to get that into this tiny little pot. I think maybe we'll have 2 pots and then just mix them together. Will that work? Is that going to work? Is this going to be a disaster? I think this might be a disaster. You know what, that's okay. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I might put down... I'm going to put down a coaster. This is just a little bit of ply. And then we're going to squeeze this in here. Hopefully, this won't go everywhere. It's going to go everywhere, isn't it? Yeah, almost certainly going to go everywhere. So that looks about half of one of these little pots and far more than we actually need. Pull those syringes back up. Put a plunger back up. Come on, pull that back in. There we go. Right. I really don't want to get this stuff all over my hands. I've been there and done that. It smells so bad as well. And that's... I mean, they didn't even break in the same place. This is just... not going well. And look, it's leaking out the back end. This isn't going well. Let's go in the bin, isn't it? Oh, no. Oh, it's just... it just gets everywhere. Right. Okay, I've got some kitchen roll. Got some kitchen roll. I'm going to put that on there. Hope we've got no more leaks. I don't really want that all over the cable. When I... is it going to be too big? I'm better off with a... There we go. Better off with a skewer. Okay, so we're going to just decant one into the other. Very, very slowly. Let's give that some encouragement. I've got to wonder about the wisdom of using a syringe for this stuff now. Is it going to pick it up? I just don't know if this is going to work. I do know we just get this in here and get it mixed. Otherwise, eventually, what we'll do is it will just the top will go off, and then we'll have some clear resin just in a pot, which isn't really what we want. Yeah, far too much in there. Better off having too much and too little, I suppose. Mix this thoroughly. Alright, okay, so we've got that. We'll suck this up. Obviously, it goes without saying the syringe, once this is done, is going to be of no use whatsoever. So, suck that up. Are we going to suck that up? Oh. Yeah, some of it. I mean, that's probably enough to fill that. Probably. Okay, so get a syringe on there, and this is all going horribly, horribly wrong. Let's get a syringe on there, a needle on there, sorry, and we're just going to inject that, hopefully inject that down into here. No, I think this stuff is just too viscous for this kind of needle. Well, again, maybe not. Oh, actually, no. Do you know what? It is going. Slowly, but it's going. Because we want to get that right down into the bottom there. What we don't want to do is end up with it everywhere else. So I think I'll pick this up and have a look at it. I think we're good. I'd like to be sure though. Really brim that, fill that to the top. And then throw that away, sharpish. This is the solution I came up with for keeping that cable roughly in the centre, and it's worked pretty well. It's not quite perfect, but it'll do. The resin's almost gone off. It did require another fill, so only about halfway up. I couldn't really see that with this in the middle of the bench here. Let's actually get really close to it. So yeah, the point is that this thing works. It's little bit of a bodge, but I'm sure there's a I'm sure if someone who restores these things professionally is watching this, like, yeah, that's the wrong way to do it. But you know what? I don't care. It works. And here we go. It's all fixed. It's on my shirt now, and hopefully it sounds good. I won't really know until I put the edit together. It sounded right through the headphones. I do find that Rode mics tend to be on the warm side, regardless of whether they're podcasting mics, shotguns, lavs. They tend to have a warmth, a bassiness about them. The MEM Countryman mic that I usually use, the Countryman MEM mic that I usually use, is very neutral. It's really, really neutral. So you can EQ it and make it sound however you want. But out of the box, or say out of the box, out of the field recorder, it tends to need a little bit of work, especially if you're then kind of matching it at different volumes and whatnot, or in different situations. It needs a fair bit of work in the EQ to get it right. But you know, we'll see how this one sounds and whether it becomes a mic of choice or not. I've just got my Rode lavalier Go back as well, so I want to try that out in another video. Anyway, I hope that's been fairly useful for you. Gone through and actually soldered up, fixed a mic with a dodgy plug. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.